I remember the day I left. It wasn't a dramatic exit, no cinematic slamming of doors or shouted declarations. It was quiet, clinical, and deadly, at least to the girl I used to be. She died in the dust of the driveway, choked by the realization that her own blood had chosen profit over her potential. I was 22, freshly graduated from MIT with a dual major in computer science and applied mathematics, and armed with a patented algorithm for predictive market analytics that venture capitalists were already calling the next unicorn. My grandmother, bless her wise and generous soul, had foreseen this. Her will stipulated a trust fund, precisely $8 million, to be released to me upon my graduation, solely for the purpose of funding my initial startup phase. It was the launch pad, the oxygen I needed to take flight. But the inheritance never materialized. The lawyer, a flustered man named Mr. Finch who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, informed me that the funds had been reallocated. He used the softest language, but the meaning was clear: the money was gone. Serena, my older sister, the golden child, had been appointed executor of the estate, and she, with the tacit, shameful approval of my parents, had deemed me too young and too ambitious to handle such a sum. "Evelyn, dear," my mother had said, folding her hands over the mahogany dining table, her eyes avoiding mine. "Serena needs it now. Her boutique, the Gilded Cage, needs that capital injection to survive the slow season. You are so clever, you can always earn it back, can't you?" Serena, 3 years my senior, merely smiled, a thin, knowing twist of the lips. She wasn't clever, she was charismatic, and she knew how to play on my parents' deep-seated fear of risk, a fear I had always embodied with my aggressive, forward-looking ideas. They loved Serena's safe, predictable ventures, the boutique that sold overpriced trinkets, the stable, boring fiancé, the easy smiles. They preferred comfort over innovation, and they deemed my $8 million inheritance a liability if it fell into my hands. The betrayal was total. It wasn't just the money, though losing my seed capital meant scraping for years in cheap, hostile incubators. It was the dismissal, the profound rejection of my worth. They had essentially declared that my proven genius, my sleepless nights in lecture halls, and my radical vision were less valuable than Serena's struggling shop. They hadn't just stolen my inheritance, they had stolen my validation. That night, I packed a single suitcase and walked out. I didn't cry. Tears, I realized, were a waste of precious water that could be better used for hydration during a coding marathon. The coldness settled in, a smooth, hard marble forming where my heart used to be. My ambition ceased to be a desire for success, it became a requirement for survival, and more importantly, a weapon for revenge. I vowed that I would not only earn back the $8 million they had stolen, but I would build a life so untouchable, so astronomically successful, that they would one day be forced to stand beneath me and look up, begging for the grace they had once denied me. The cost of their betrayal was not $8 million. It was my soul, temporarily traded for power. The next decade was a blur of server racks, code, and synthetic coffee. I named my company Apex Core. It wasn't cute or clever, it was a statement. We specialized in hyper-efficient, secure data infrastructure, and my refined algorithm quickly became the backbone of global corporate security. I worked with a terrifying focus, fueled by the rage of my betrayal. Every milestone achieved, the first million, the 100th employee, the IPO, was a step closer to my inevitable revenge. By 32, Apex Core was valued at $3 billion, and I was the youngest female CEO on the major financial indexes. Money was just a tool to demonstrate dominance, so I bought the penthouse, One Grand Plaza, Penthouse 60A, valued at $12.4 million. It was $4 million more than what they had stolen, a monument of glass and steel proving their judgment of me was definitively wrong. My family's tentative calls began after the IPO. My mother, fawning, quickly transitioned to requests. Serena's Gilded Cage is struggling with its web presence. Could your people look at it? I shut her down instantly. Apex Core charges $5,000 an hour for base consulting. I don't offer discounts, not even for family. They became intimidated, but the resentment remained. Serena, the actual target, was a financial wreck. She had squandered the $8 million on over-leveraged investments, and now, styling herself a lifestyle influencer, she used her remaining cash to stage a fake luxury life while bleeding money. Her collapse was a mathematical certainty I watched with calculated detachment. A single anomaly breached my 10-year plan, Daniel. I met him at a tech summit where he spoke on ethical AI. He saw through my CEO armor to the core of the wound, talking of poetry and purpose, things with zero ROI. He observed one evening, "You built Apex Core because you needed to prove them wrong. The money was the key, but the lock was your need for validation." His warmth was dangerous, offering peace, which meant letting go of the rage. I terminated the relationship, needing the final confrontation, needing the rage to see me through. The phone call came a month later. It was my father, his voice cracked with panic. "Evelyn. It's Serena. She's facing total ruin. She leveraged the family home for a crypto scheme, and the bank is foreclosing. We need $3 million in less than a week." My jaw tightened on the exquisite irony. The money they had stolen was now costing them the asset they valued above my future. "I might be able to help," I finally said, savoring his desperation. "But not with a loan. I've discovered a contingency plan in grandmother's estate, an archaic document called a revocable deed of contingency tied to a holding company." I was lying, of course, having created the legal shell myself. The assets are now worth close to $20 million. Since Serena was the original executor, the funds legally revert to her, if she can prove absolute financial stewardship of the initial $8 million. I explained the trap. If she tries to claim it and the legal review finds she misappropriated the $8 million, she faces a massive civil suit for the original trust amount, total personal bankruptcy. This is your chance for the $20 million, father. But Serena must convince the firm of her legal innocence, or she loses everything. Greed instantly replaced his fear. I scheduled the meeting for the following Friday in the boardroom of Apex Core. The boardroom was all polished obsidian and smoked glass. It was designed to exude quiet, absolute power. My chair, at the head of the 15-foot table, was the only one that swiveled. The family sat across from me, looking small and distinctly out of place. My mother fussed with her suit jacket, my father avoided my gaze, and Serena was vibrating with a controlled, predatory excitement. She saw $20 million floating just out of reach. Ms. Hayes, a woman with the legal precision of a laser, sat to my right, her notepad open but her eyes focused entirely on Serena. "Thank you all for attending," I began, my voice calm, professional, and entirely detached. As I explained, this is a review of the revocable deed of contingency associated with the Reed estate's final assets. Ms. Hayes has structured this meeting as a pre-litigation review. Serena, your current financial difficulties are immaterial. The only question today is the fidelity of your actions a decade ago concerning Evelyn's $8 million trust fund. Serena, rehearsed and confident, piped up immediately. "This is ridiculous. I acted with the full knowledge and consent of our parents. The money was used to stabilize the family's economic position, which I believed was the spirit of the will. I have documents to prove that the funds went directly into Gilded Cage as capital investment." She slid 3 binders across the table, filled with neatly prepared ledgers and statements designed by her fiancé, a man who, I knew, was a master of creative accounting. "The Gilded Cage was failing," I interjected, still calm. "You took my seed capital, my future, to prop up a hobby business. That is financial mismanagement." "It was not mismanagement. It was a necessity." Serena shot back, losing her composure slightly. And what about you, Evelyn? You built a billion-dollar company. You clearly didn't need that money. You're just being vindictive. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the glass. Vindictive? Perhaps. But legally sound. The terms of the trust were absolute. That money was mine for my business. You breached that trust. And that, Serena, is where the trouble begins. I signaled to Ms. Hayes, who straightened her posture. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Ms. Reed, let's dispense with the theatrics, Ms. Hayes stated, her voice sharp and metallic. My client, Evelyn Reed, CEO of Apex Corp, is not interested in hypotheticals. She has, over the last 3 years, used her corporate resources and significant private funds to conduct a comprehensive forensic audit of every dime of the original $8 million. This was not about finding the contingency document, which, for the record, does not exist. The color drained from Serena's face, and my parents exchanged looks of profound alarm. I don't understand, my father whispered, fear gripping his throat. It means, I explained gently, enjoying the slow collapse of their carefully constructed reality, that the $20 million fund was a lure. I created the illusion of a forgotten inheritance, knowing Serena's greed, knowing her need for instant, massive capital, would compel her to walk directly into the jaws of the law. I looked at Serena. You thought I was offering you a second chance at my money. I was offering you a chance to confess and beg, which is exactly what your false ledgers prove you did. Ms. Hayes continued, her voice gaining momentum. The real purpose of this meeting, and of the illusory $20 million fund, was to secure final, undeniable proof of the original betrayal. We now have signed admissions, fabricated financial statements, and clear evidence of conspiracy to deceive the original trust's beneficiary, my client, all presented here today, in an attempt to acquire non-existent assets. Your intent, Serena, is clear, sustained, deliberate fraud. She paused, allowing the gravity of the words to settle. We also have documented, corroborated testimony from Mr. Finch, the original lawyer, who confirmed that your parents were fully aware and signed off on the document that misclassified Evelyn as financially unstable, allowing you to seize control of the trust. My parents gasped, their faces horrified. They were exposed, stripped bare of their plausible deniability. This was the climax. Total, absolute power. I had them, all of them, dead to rights. I could have pursued criminal charges, initiated a ruinous civil suit, and watched as they lost everything, becoming public pariahs. The decade of rage demanded it. I looked at Serena, who was now weeping silently, her carefully applied makeup running. She wasn't angry, she was broken, the reality of her self-made ruin magnified by the size of my power. She hadn't just lost the $20 million, which never existed, she had lost the game. But as I looked at her, and at my parents, pathetic and terrified, a strange thing happened. The fire in my chest didn't flare, it banked. The intense, burning core of revenge that had powered my entire ascent suddenly felt unnecessary. Ms. Hayes, I said, lifting my hand. The review is concluded. There will be no civil or criminal action. Apex Corp's legal department will absorb the costs of this investigation. Ms. Hayes looked at me, surprised, but nodded once, professionally. What? Serena croaked, looking up through tear-filled eyes. You're not prosecuting? I looked straight at her, my voice softening, shedding the CEO armor for the first time in 10 years. No, Serena. Because the $8 million wasn't the goal. The goal was to prove, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that I didn't need you. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need your stability or their fear. I needed to build a life so strong that the destruction you wrought on me could never touch me again. I did that. That is the revenge. Not your ruin, but my freedom. I stood up, signaling the meeting was over. My father finally met my gaze, his eyes pooling with tears of shame and a nascent respect. You won, Evelyn. You won everything, he murmured. I did, I agreed. And now I'm going to use my winnings to build something real. The aftermath was quiet. My parents sold the family home, covering their debt, and moved into a modest retirement community, a lifestyle they probably should have chosen years ago. Serena had to take a legitimate job, utilizing the small amount of actual capital she had left. She was, for the first time in her life, forced to be self-made, too. I started seeing Daniel again. I sought him out, humbled and exhausted, not by the confrontation, but by the sudden, terrifying emptiness of having achieved my singular, consuming goal. He met me not with judgment, but with an open hand. Welcome back, Evelyn, he said, the day I showed him the penthouse for the first time. The view was the same, but the room felt different. I had replaced the sharp, cold marble table with a warm, circular wood one. I had installed a massive, comfortable sofa where I could actually relax. The entire space, once a monument to my loneliness, was beginning to feel like a home. I finally understood what he meant. I hadn't pushed him away because he was a distraction, I had pushed him away because I was afraid that if I let in genuine love, the rage that fueled my life would dissipate before the mission was complete. One evening, 3 months after the boardroom confrontation, the doorbell rang. It was my parents. They stood in the foyer of my enormous penthouse, dwarfed by the scale of my achievement. My mother's eyes were swollen. Evelyn. We didn't come to ask for anything. We came to apologize. Not the forced apology of people hoping for a loan, but a real one. We chose comfort over courage, and we robbed you of your start, not because we didn't love you, but because we didn't understand you. We were wrong. We're sorry. My father stepped forward. We watched you build this empire from nothing, Evelyn. You did it completely on your own, after we took your launch pad. You are the strongest person I have ever known. We were fools. The words were raw, unprompted, and sincere. The marble I had built around my heart finally cracked, and a deep, surprising ache surfaced. Thank you, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I accept your apology. My mother started to cry, and I, the woman who had not cried in 13 years, allowed her to pull me into a genuine, unburdened hug. Later that night, Daniel and I were standing on the balcony, the city shimmering below us. So, was the revenge worth it? He asked, wrapping an arm around me. I leaned my head on his shoulder, the contact feeling like coming home. The revenge? The confrontation? It gave me the power I needed to be independent. It validated the decision to walk away. It broke the spell of their judgment. But the revenge itself was just a scaffolding. The true prize, Daniel, wasn't the penthouse or the billion-dollar company, or even the apology. I squeezed his hand. The prize was realizing that the $8 million they stole could never buy the clarity I earned. They thought they were protecting their comfort. They actually gave me the greatest gift, the absolute certainty that I owe them nothing, and that I can build a life, and a love, that is entirely mine. I looked out at the lights. The coldness was gone, replaced by a deep, quiet contentment. My revenge was complete, not because they were ruined, but because I was finally, profoundly, whole. The power I had acquired was no longer a weapon, it was simply the foundation upon which I chose to build my peace.